This next question, we're going to move on from putting Cyan and Blue on the spot. We'll get back to them in a little bit, but for now, let's put Red on the spot instead, since it is Valentine's Day episode, and we're going to talk about all forms of love or lack thereof, or whatever you decide that you best represent yourself as at any given time. This is a blanket statement to everyone. Love is love, and also not love is not love, and do what you want to do with your life. This question comes from Athaleus. I am so not on a roll today. Athaleus, to Red, only if you're comfortable with it. How did you figure out your ace? When did you first hear the term? What did the journey to accepting it look like? Were you nervous about coming out? And were there any negative reactions? How did you even notice you were not straight? Thank you guys for your awesome work. Your videos are often the highlight of my day. It's very sweet.
Oh, thank you. This is a bit dicey. So here's the thing. I spent basically the majority of my youth and teen years not questioning my orientation. Because strangely, when you are ace, that kind of stuff feels like it doesn't actually matter. So I assumed that was the normal experience, and that I was probably straight. And then at one point, I think the most I got was I was like, but do I feel different about boys than girls? I guess not. So maybe I'm bi. And that was basically as far as I got for a while. The thing is, it's a bit tragic, I guess. I was dating a guy who I really liked, but as our relationship was progressing, I was kind of like, this is feeling not great, and I don't understand why. And I kind of started looking around. I actually don't remember where I first encountered the term, but I do remember that just the moment of like, oh, it's a thing! I might have just been Googling around. I might have already heard that the term existed, but I hadn't made that connection, and then at one point I was like, oh wait, that's what it is? Oh! To answer the question of like, was there hesitation? No. I was just so blown away by the fact that I had a word for what I was, and that I wasn't like... okay, this is a quick tangent before I go off on that. Basically, when you think that your experience is normal, but on some level deeply unpleasant and incongruous with your life, it just feels like that's what it's going to be forever. Like, oh, everyone feels like this. And if you say, like, I just don't know if I, like, want to get serious with this guy, a lot of people will tell you, oh, every woman feels that way. Not true. Don't believe them when they say that. But, there's this kind of this background radiation of like, nobody's like fully happy. It's like, that's, don't accept that as an answer either. But if you believe that that's just, that you're within this space of normalcy and your life is just slightly unpleasant at all times, that just doesn't feel good, obviously, but it doesn't even occur to you necessarily that there's anything that can be changed about that or anything that can be done, because you assume that your experience is normal and universal, and thus everyone else must just be dealing with it. Must be dealing with the same stuff that you are. And then when I ran into this thing that was like, hey, turns out you're not normal and that's a good thing, I was like, hell the fuck yeah! I actually have a word for what I am. And by the way, I'm not saying that this is not a normal thing. The more I learn about this, the more I'm like, no, the space of normalcy encompasses a lot of stuff. But for me, the realization that my experience was not universal and thus not quote-unquote normal was actually very important, because it made me realize, like, oh, the rules don't really apply the same because I'm not within the space of people that they were made for. Okay. So I was extremely excited. I told everybody. I still don't know the names of most of the people in our high school class, and I told most of them. They were like, oh, are you still dating that guy? And I was like, no, actually, because guess what? And they were like, oh, you don't need to tell me. And I was like, no, I want to. So it's
Sit down, motherfucker.
You're gonna know. I was even less socially apt than I am now, so you can imagine. But yeah, I was extremely excited because I was like, there's a word. It's actually okay that I'm like this. I never have to do this thing. Because, when you grow up, everyone kind of tells you, like, yeah, dating, it's a good thing. And then eventually you'll get married to some guy and have 2.5 children. And I was like, oh, I guess if that's the way it's going to go. And then I was like, I don't have to do any of that shit. And, like, I didn't have to before, but why would I question it if it was what everyone was supposed to do? And no alternatives were seriously presented to me in a context of, like, this could be you. So I was completely over the moon. I was like, I'm this thing! Yeah, baby! I didn't really have negative experiences in person. I think most of the people I told either didn't know what it was or were like, all right, have fun with that. I think most of them didn't know at the time, honestly. It wasn't as, like, super... It didn't have as much mainstream knowledge as it does nowadays. I still don't remember where I found it, so, that's pretty telling. I did have a couple
I'm just
friends...
imagining, like, a close-up magician is like, is this Ace your card? And Red's
oh, man, baby! I do remember there were a couple people who were like, can you tell me more about this? And then, like, 2 months later, they were like, so guess who's also Ace? So that was fun. I didn't really have much negative experiences with that. But when I went from high school to college, I found there was, like, a tea club for aces, so I just had like an immediate social circle, which was really pleasant. Honestly, the most that happened is like I started paying a little more attention to like the internet discourse about asexuality. Not a good time to be doing that. That was when it was getting really unpleasant. That was basically the worst I ever got it. It was never targeted at me specifically. I was just getting hit by the blowback of a lot of people being like, actually, this is problematic and bad, and you should feel bad for living. So again, never like personally targeted at me, but still not a fun thing to run into when you're trying to find like cake memes or whatever. But yeah, I think actually that did sort of motivate me to be rather more open about it on the channel specifically, because I was like, I had a doozy of a time realizing this was even an option, and it did make me kind of unhappy before that. So maybe I should be a little more public about this, just so people like know that it's an option and that option is fun and cool. But yeah, that was basically it. Figured it out, found a moment of extreme, I don't need to do this thing that I was finding kind of awkward. But I do want to say, there's plenty of aces that do date and love dating. I'm just currently not one of them. Yeah.
I am one of them.
Yeah. For me, it was like, I had this like experience where people would ask me out and I'd be like, I don't really have a reason to say no, and I guess that's how everybody feels, so sure. And that's not actually how it's supposed to work, people. So for me, it was just like the relief of I don't have to do this ever, and nobody ever has to, but having the option of like, not only do I never have to do this, I don't have to be with anyone at any point. I can just do my own thing forever if I want to. Having that option was very, very freeing. So also, now is not a good time to try dating new people anyway, so, it's working out pretty well.
Tangential to that, I was a little surprised, or I guess not really surprised, but at the magnitude of people in the comments of my Valentine's Day video who were like, I love the ace rep with Louis XVI's story of like, poor man didn't want to marry Marie, didn't want anything to do with this. When I said like, can't you just let this library ace live his life? So many people were like, yes! Ace rep, and I was like, oh, unintentionally, actually, yeah, ace rep.
Yeah.
So it comes in many different flavors.
Oh yeah. Looking through it as a lens to examine history with, you run into a lot of characters where you're like, don't know exactly what that guy's deal was. Probably not straight though.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's all you can get, but
it's like, I wonder what Queen Elizabeth I's deal might have been, famously never marrying.
Oh,
Maybe she wasn't about that nonsense.
There's a lot of options, and again, this is a space where every take is going to be spicy to somebody, but fundamentally your own lived experience is not wrong, and it's good to be told that there are options, because sometimes you examine it and sometimes it doesn't even occur to you that you can examine it until somebody points it out to you. So I think that having a wide diversity of examples of quote-unquote representation, I think that's possibly the healthiest thing a growing person can have, because it lets them explore, like, what might I be? And then if they find something that clicks, it really clicks.
Mm-hmm. And if they change their mind later,
that's also fine. Totally fine. I mean, I mentioned that bit where I was like, I'm probably bi, because I think that guy's about as cute as that girl, and that's all I can examine right now. Yep. Because if that's the only metric, it's the only metric you have.
It's a complex world we live in, and you gotta just explore and figure out what works for you. But this next question is not necessarily quite of the same level of insightfulness, but it is from our guest. So this question comes from Cyan on Discord.
I went on Discord specifically for this.